Alright guys, so we are going to talk about social change and prohibition in the 1920s. Some of this information you guys are already going to be familiar with because you've been exposed to it in maybe your 8th grade class, your U.S. history or South Carolina history class. But a lot of it's going to be new, so make sure you pay attention, okay? And make sure you are filling in the blanks on your guided notes, okay? So, first thing first, our objectives or our goals, what we're going to learn by the conclusion of this lesson, we are going to compare economic and cultural life in rural America to that of urban America. And remember, rural America is that farmland, whereas urban America are those cities. Urban means cities, rural think country. We're going to look at changes in the immigration policy in the 1920s. And remember, that deals with people that are moving to America, coming to America from different countries. We're going to look at the goals and the motives of the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, in the 1920s. And we're going to discuss the successes and failures of the 18th Amendment. Okay, so our important terms and people. Modernism is the trend that emphasized science and secular values over traditional religious ideas. And we're going to expand on that as we go through. Fundamentalism was the movement or attitude stressing strict and literal adherence to a set of basic principles, okay? So think of modernism as sort of adapting to the times, right? If someone says you're more modern, right, then maybe your dress is more modern, so you're more up to date. Whereas fundamentalism, you're sticking to traditional ideas and principles, traditional things. The Scopes trial was the 1925 trial of a Tennessee school teacher, for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. And we're going to look at that more later on. But Clarence Darrow was the defense attorney in that Scopes trial above, okay? A quota system was a formula used to determine how many immigrants could enter the United States annually from a given country. The Ku Klux Klan was a group violently opposed to African Americans, Jews, Catholics, and immigrants. Prohibition was a ban on the manufacture, transport, and sale of alcohol. The 18th Amendment was a 1919 constitutional amendment that established prohibition. And remember, prohibition is that ban of alcohol. So the 18th Amendment is what made that legal, or rather illegal. The Volstead Act was a law that gave the government power to enforce that 18th Amendment, and a bootlegger was someone who sold that illegal alcohol during Prohibition. All right, how did Americans differ on major social and cultural issues? In the 1920s, we see that many city dwellers, or people who lived in cities, enjoyed a rising standard of living. They were making more money, while most farmers were suffering through hard times. They weren't doing so well. Conflicting visions for the nation's future heightened tensions between the cities and the rural areas. In 1920, for the first time, more Americans lived in cities than in rural areas. In cities, many people enjoyed prosperity and were open to social change and new ideas. And remember, prosperity is... Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about this hiccup, but I'm just going to repeat what I was just saying. In cities, many people enjoyed prosperity and were open to social change and new ideas. Okay, guys? Prosperity means if you're prospering, that means you're doing really well. They're typically wealthier is what we're talking about when we say prosperity in relation to what we're talking about. They have better jobs. Maybe they're working less hours. They're making more money overall, so they're more prosperous. They're doing better. But times were harder in rural areas. Rural people generally preferred traditional views of science, religion, and culture. So we see those people in the cities that are making more money, they're open to change and new ideas, whereas the people that are living in the countryside in those more rural areas aren't so open to change. An example of this clash of values was the tension between modernism and Christian fundamentalism in the 1920s. So again, modernism emphasized science and secular values. Those were the people who were okay with change. And they're starting to look at history more scientifically, right? Rather than versus the Bible, which is more fundamentalism, okay? Fundamentalism emphasized Protestant teachings and taught that every word in the Bible was literal truth, okay? Every word for word, was literal truth, meaning it literally happened the exact way that you're reading it. Attitudes towards education illustrate another difference between those urban and rural perspectives, right? The city and country perspectives. Urban people saw formal education as essential to getting a good job. But in those rural country areas, book learning, or so schooling was called, interfered with farm work and was less highly valued, right, guys? In those rural areas, you have, maybe dozens or tens or hundreds of acres of land that had to be tended to. So they thought that you can't spend 8 hours a day in school because that interferes with your ability to feed the animals or plow the fields or whatnot. Education essentially became a battleground for fundamentalists and modernists for their values in the 1925 Scopes trial, okay? Tennessee had made it illegal to teach evolution in public schools. And remember, evolution is that idea like the Big Bang, okay? Biology teacher John Scopes challenged that law. However, he was that teacher that got in trouble. And defense attorney Clarence Darrow tried to use science to cast doubt on religious beliefs. Okay, so Clarence Darrow was the lawyer who stepped up to defend John Scopes when he was arrested for teaching evolution in a Tennessee public school. Okay, and he tried to defend him by casting doubt on religious beliefs. And trying to essentially disprove the Bible. The Scopes trial illustrated a major cultural and religious division, but it did not resolve the issue, right? It sort of made it apparent that, the people that are living in these rural areas really believe in fundamentalism, and the people in the cities are more modern, but, we still don't have an answer to the issue. Scopes was ultimately found guilty of teaching evolution and was fined. Because, essentially, guys, he did teach evolution, and that was against the law. It wasn't, the trial was not to determine whether or not evolution was real or whether or not evolution was something that should be taught in school at all. The law said teaching it is against the law. So he was teaching it, so therefore he broke the law at the very basic level. So he was found guilty and he was fined. The conflict over teaching evolution in public school, though, still continues today. Immigrants were at the center of another cultural clash. So again, we're seeing lots of clashes going on head to head. Many Mexicans settled in the sparsely populated areas of the Southwest. And remember, when we say Southwest, we're talking Arizona, Mexico, maybe some regions of Texas, Southern California, those areas, okay? Nativists feared that immigrants took jobs away from native-born workers and threatened American traditions. After World War I, the Red Scare increased distrust of immigrants. And remember, that Red Scare dealt with communism. People in America at this time were very fearful of immigrants. And, again, we see that they were concerned about taking jobs away, threatening their traditions, just sort of threatening their way of life. So that's another cultural clash that we see during this time. In 1924, the National Origins Act set up a quota system for immigrants, okay? Each country could only send so many people to America during this time to actually live or to immigrate here. For each nationality, the quota allowed up to 2% of the 1890s total population of that nationality living in the United States. Okay, so not only they were limiting them, but guys, you have to realize they were using the population numbers from nearly, almost 30 years ago. So you have to realize in 30 years, the population grows a monumental amount. So 2% is a small amount as it is, but 2% from 30 years ago is a lot smaller than you would actually realize. These quotas limited the availability of many immigrants, like Italian and Asian people, to enter the country. Guys, if they were only letting 700 people from maybe Italy immigrate to America, if you were number 701, sorry, you are not coming. That's essentially what those quotas are. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. Trends such as urbanization, modernism, and increasing diversity made some people lash out against change. And we're going to see the KKK was very much anti-change, anti-traditionalism. well, not anti, they were actually pro-traditionalism, anti-modernism, I'm sorry. Beginning in 1915, there was a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. They promoted hatred of African Americans, Jews, Catholic, and immigrants. At its height, they had between 4 and 5 million members. Others embraced the idea of racial, ethnic, and religious diversity. Many valued the idea that the United States was this melting pot where tons of different people with different ethnicities and different backgrounds could sort of come together and live peacefully and coexist with each other, right? We all sort of melted into this pot together, and you couldn't mix us up. We weren't separate from one another. We coexisted, and we made our communities what they were because we were all living there together. But many valued that, but many were very much against that. But groups such as the NAACP and the Jewish Anti-Defamation League worked to counter the Klan and its values, okay? So, the NAACP and the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, okay, guys? Defamation, if you've ever heard the phrase defamation of character, that's when you tell a lie about somebody to damage their character. So, if they're anti-defamation, that means they're against hurting their character, which means they're working to promote the character of the Jewish people. By the late 1920s, many Klan leaders had been exposed as corrupt. Okay, so they were actually working to sort of expose the crooked ways of these Klan's members, and that was actually proved pretty successful for this group. Alcoholic beverages were another divisive issue. Divisive means sort of splitting. There's splitting some hairs. There's a lot of people that are against it, but there's a lot of people that are also for it. In 1919, the 18th Amendment banned the making, distributing, or selling of alcohol, and that became part of the Constitution. The Volstead Act is what allowed the government to enforce that amendment, and prohibition became law in the United States, okay? So, realize, when I say prohibition, that means no alcohol, okay? Dries were those people who favored prohibition, hailing the law as a noble experiment. They believed that prohibition was good for society, whereas wets were the people that claimed that enforcing prohibition did not stop drinking, that it actually encouraged hypocrisy and illegal activity. Guys, hypocrisy, think of the word hypocrite. When you see that, a hypocrite is someone who says one thing, but then goes and does that exact thing that they're sort of preaching against, right? So we see these two sort of sides that form. The dries are the people that are for prohibition or for no alcohol, and then you have the wets, who are the people that are anti-prohibition or for alcohol. Prohibition did not stop people from drinking alcoholic beverages. As you guys have seen in the Great Gatsby videos, it definitely did not stop them. A large illegal network, sort of like a black market, was created for people to smuggle, distribute, and sell alcohol. This benefited gangsters such as Al Capone, who we see become very popular during this time period. People bought alcohol illegally from bootleggers at speakeasies. And if you think of the Great Gatsby, that's what we're talking about, okay? Prohibition contributed to the rise of organized crime. Essentially, this was a very popular pastime, and so we see that many people aren't willing to give it up. And so, rather than give up alcohol, they're willing to become somewhat of criminals.